Welcome to our panel on advancing U.S. government collaboration with American Chambers of Commerce. In the next 90 minutes, we'll be looking at best practices between the U.S. government and the business community in the Asia-Pacific region. I'm pleased to serve as your moderator for this panel. I'd like to start immediately with our keynote speech. It's an honor for me to introduce Deputy Secretary of State Tom Nides, who was appointed by President Obama in December of 2010 and joined the Department of State in January 2011. Deputy Secretary Nides manages the department's presence in and relationship with Iraq, Afghanistan, and Pakistan. He leads the department's efforts to elevate and promote economic statecraft and oversees the department's management and budget. Immediately following the 3/11 Great East Japan earthquake, Deputy Secretary Nides took a strong personal interest in overseeing the U.S. government's civilian response in support of relief efforts, and he quickly became an enthusiastic champion of Japan's recovery. Deputy Secretary Nides is not only a highly respected government leader with experience at the USTR and on Capitol Hill, he is also a former businessman. Before joining the Obama administration, he was a chief operating officer at Morgan Stanley. His distinguished business career lends him keen insights into the initiatives that he manages. That's why we are particularly fortunate to have him here today with us to share his thoughts on business, government, and the vital relationship between them. Please join me in welcoming Deputy Secretary Tom Nides.
Thank you very much for that very kind introduction. I promise you I have no props, and I will not be trying to dribble any basketball. So, Michael, you're in good shape. Good morning, and it's a pleasure to be among so many of my friends and some of my most distinguished colleagues the world has seen. So thank you for making the trip. Now, some of you might have heard me say this before, but I wear two hats. I'm here as a diplomat, but I also am here as a recovering businessman, and I'm also becoming an expert in Japan travel. This is my third trip to Tokyo in the last year, and I am thrilled to be back. I'd like to thank the ACCJ President Michael Alfon, thank you Michael, and the ACCJ Board of Governors and the entire APCAC board for inviting me to speak here today. We're meeting just days before, as Michael said, the one-year anniversary of a terrible earthquake and a tsunami that forever will change the lives of millions of people. Japan's recovery over the last year is an inspiration to the world. What could have been a crippling disaster instead became a remarkable testament to the spirit and the resiliency of the Japanese people. The world pulled together to support Japan in those days and months after March 11th, led by, as Michael pointed out, the distinguished John Roos. Let me be clear, our efforts would nowhere have been as significant and as impactful if it wasn't for Ambassador Roos. We are fortunate to have John Roos as our ambassador here, but you and the people of Japan are lucky to have John Roos, so I too salute your great leadership. Thank you, John. Many of you have contributed to the March 11th disasters, and American corporations donated nearly $300 million for relief efforts and recovery efforts. American and Japanese rescue and relief forces worked side by side, starting with the hours, as you all know, of the tsunami. Of course, Japan has done the same thing for us. In the wake of Hurricane Katrina and Rita, the Japanese people were among the first to respond. And in those terrible days following 9/11, the Japanese volunteers worked at ground zero day in and day out. What matters is most that our countries step up for each other. That's what friends do for each other. Now, last week, Secretary Clinton hosted the first ever Global Business Conference at the State Department in Washington. We brought together senior U.S. officials from more than 160 business leaders from almost over 120 countries. My friend and yours, Charles Lake, was one of those participants, and I'm glad he's here with us today, so thank you, Charles. The Global Business Conference had one single goal: to figure out how the United States can make it easier for companies to do business internationally and create American jobs. Today we want to continue that discussion with you, and I am joined, as I mentioned, by my panel of colleagues, our chief diplomats from all over Asia. And by the way, for them to leave their posts to come here is only a testament to how important they believe this forum is. Because they know how important the economics is to our relationship in Asia and how important the economic relationship between Asia and the United States is to the world. So as we begin this discussion, I'd like to make 4 key points. First, how the United States is sharpening our focus on economics as a foreign policy tool. Second, how the business and economics are particularly important to our foreign policy in the Asia-Pacific region. Third, how the United States is doing a great deal to deepen our economic cooperation with the region. And finally, how we can and must do more and how we need business to be part of the effort.